All right, welcome back, the genius. Okay, so in this session, all right, let's take a look at function expression in JavaScript. Okay, we are going to actually have an extensive look on function expression in JavaScript. What does it mean? When do you need to use it? What are the different types of function expression? Okay, so now we will see what function expression is. So, what is a function expression? A function expression defines a function as part of an expression. Remember, we talked about expressions, and I made you understand that expressions are anything that can be evaluated by JavaScript. Okay, that could, after evaluation, there will be a value. So now, a function expression is a function that is part of an expression rather than as a standalone declaration. Remember, we have thought of how you declare functions. You declare the function, then you call them. Now, this time around, you might be assigning a function to a variable, or a function is going to be part of an expression. All right. So I'm going to explain better with code. So it is often assigned to a variable, so it can be used in a very similar way to other values. All right, just like you say, let name equal to person. You can say let say hello equal to the function declaration. Do you understand it? Okay, so you can actually assign a function declaration to a variable. And when you can now use that variable any way you want to use it. Okay, so we are going to see it. Okay, in JavaScript, function expressions are a way to define functions by assigning them to variables. You can assign them to variables, you can assign them to objects or other structures. So as long as a function is part of an expression, anything that is an expression, as long as a function is part of an expression, that function is called a function expression. Okay, so this approach differs from function declarations and offers several unique properties and use cases. All right, so there are places where you don't need to do function declaration right away. There are places you need to use function expressions, and we are going to see some cases now. Now, the thing is this: we are not going to, there are some things I have actually skipped. I didn't include them in this video because of they are somehow advanced. We'll still visit them later on. Okay, but for now they are advanced. So I will just have to um, leave this thing on this level so that you can understand. So when we start talking about advanced JavaScript, then we'll now bring some of these things up again. Okay. All right. So this is the syntax. Constant my function equal to then this function. So let's go to code and let's write. So I have this file called expression.js. All right, so I want to write a function. I'll just say const and I'll say greet. Oops. I'll say, all right, say greet is equal to. I will now say function, all right, something like this. All right. This function could have parameters. This function might not have, it might have return values, it might not have return values. So anything that has to do with parameters and return values, we have already talked about them in the last session. Okay, so go and take your time to, if you don't understand it, go and watch it again. Okay. So functions can have parameters, it might not have parameters, whatever it is, we have discussed it in the last session. So right now, what we are doing here is we are assigning. So if I want to now use this variable. Now, I can use this thing as a variable. I can actually say, okay, I can say, um, of course, I can just call, okay, let me say console.log. All right. I just want to say hello. All right. So now this is I can use this greet variable now, however I want to use it. So I can actually say, I can actually call this greet like this. Since it's a function, I'm actually calling it. So if I do and run this code, if I don't run this code, I go to debug. All right. It has called this function. Do you understand it? Okay. So this is a function expression. Normally, you could actually write a function like this. This is how you do the normal function. You could say normal function like this. This is the normal way you write a function. Then you can now call. But right now, we are assigning this function to a variable. All right, so that is what we are doing here. So this is what we call function expression. Now, this function is part of an expression. What expression? This whole thing is an expression. All right, we have a variable that is equal to this function declaration. So this function declaration is part of this expression. So any function that is part of an expression is called function expression. And then you can now use um, the variable however you want to use it. Okay. Of course, if you want to call it, you have to put the parentheses. Okay. So now, what are the types of function expressions? Let's take a look at it one by one. Now we have the anonymous function. Now this function does not have a name. That's what we have already seen. Okay. When you have something like this function does not have a name at all. It doesn't have a name. So it's an anonymous function. Okay. Now, the next one we have is a named function. And this one also has its usefulness. The function that has a name, which is useful for recursion or in debugging stack traces. Now look at something like this. All right. This greet has this function. So if I want to use this say hello inside of this function, I could actually use it. Okay. So let me show you. Okay, let me show you. If I go to code now, okay, I can say this function is say hello. It has a name. Also, why should I do this? I could actually um call do something like this. I could say hello. All right. Now, because I have named this function, all right, then inside of this same function that I have, I can call this other function. The same function, I can call it inside of its function. Now, because I have given it a name. So when I run this, you guess what? This say hello is going to run 2 times. So, okay, let me even debug. Let us see. I will debug. All right. I'll run, and let me show you how this thing is going to work. Now, I start debugging. We are here, so I will just have to step into. All right. Now, we are in here now, okay? So, the first line will be printed, all right? I step over. The first line will be printed. Now, since I am still calling this say hello function, all right, once I step into again, it's going back. Watch it. After the first line, it went to the say hello. So when I now step into this function, it went back. That means this will be printed 2 times. I step over. You can see we have hello printed 2 times. So this is where you use name functions. Okay. You use name functions whenever you will also want to make reference or use that function inside of the function. Basically, when you're writing recursive functions, we'll talk about recursive functions when we talk of advanced JavaScript, advanced functions in JavaScript. We'll talk about recursive functions, okay? But for now, just understand that you can have a named function expression, and this is how you can actually use it, okay? So I could actually stop debugging. So we also have the one we call immediately invoked function expression. Immediately invoked function expression. Immediately invoked function expression is a function expression that runs as soon as it is defined. Remember, when we declare a function, or when we declare a function, or even the function expression, the normal one, we will have to call it. So we don't call it immediately. Do you understand? You have a function, you don't call the function immediately. But for immediately invoke function expression, you are calling the function immediately. After the declaration, you're calling it right away. So it is wrapped in parentheses to indicate that it is an expression and it executes immediately. Remember, parentheses is actually when you are actually parentheses is actually an expression, okay? Anything inside it will be executed. All right. So now look at it. You can see that this function is actually wrapped inside of parentheses, and we are now calling. Now remember, the outer parenthesis means that we are calling it. So let's go to code. Let me show you. If you look at this, okay, this parenthesis outside of this grid shows that we are calling it. If I remove it, all right, nothing will happen. It will not be called. So it will not be called. Nothing will be printed because we didn't call it. But if I put this, it means that we are calling it. So the same thing with immediately invoke function. If I have something like this, okay, if I want to do the immediately invoke function, you put everything inside the parentheses, and then you also have another outer parenthesis to show that you're calling it immediately. So here now, I can say function, whether named or unnamed, I can say function. I'll just say console.log hello world. Okay. So if I run this now, remember, I am using, if I run this now, this is what we, okay, let me just take this one out or comment it so that we don't get confused. So if I save now, if I run this function, if I run this code now, we will see console.log hello. So if I run now, hello world was printed out. Now, what if I take this outer parenthesis? What will happen? Guess what will happen? It will not call because nothing will be printed out because that function was not called. Do you understand? So immediately invoke function, you wrap it inside the parentheses. That means your function declaration will be inside the parentheses. Then you will now put in something like this. All right, this means that we are calling it. So I have used this a lot, especially when I was writing this platform you're using. There's something, of course, you will still learn that there's something we call client. That's in Next.js. We call client components and server components. So if I'm not using a server component and I'm using a client component and I want to fetch data from the database, all right, I'll use immediately invoke function expression, all right, in my use effect so that once it gets to that place, the code will be run immediately and that function would run. So it means that you don't need to call it. You don't need to call it later on. You're calling it right away with the outer parenthesis. You're calling it right away. Okay, so that is how function expression immediately invoked function expression works. So if I run this again, we are going to see hello world printed out. Okay, so that is how it works. Now let us debug. Okay, if I put this here, let us see what we get. Once it gets here, it should get into, okay, we are here now. So I will say step into, it will step into the function. Do you understand? So this means we are calling it, this is an operator. All right, this is an operator. It means that we are calling it right away. And when we do that, we are going to we'll step over, it's printed out. And when you get, okay, so that is it. All right. So this is function expression, function, immediately invoke function expression. So what about hoisting? Okay, remember we discussed hoisting, variable hoisting. Okay, I don't think we have actually mentioned function hoisting, but let's talk about it now. Normally, okay, function expressions are not hoisted. But before I go in there, let me even show you what we mean by hoisting. You already know what variable hoisting is because we have treated it, but let me show you what function hoisting means. Now, I take all these things out. I can say greet. I can say hello. All right. Look at it. I'm calling this function before the function declaration. Can you imagine? I am calling this function before the function declaration. Do you think we will have any error? Let us see. All right. I'm calling this function before. Look at it. Remember, your code will execute from top to bottom, right? It will execute from top to bottom. And right now, I am calling this function. That means this will be run first before this declaration. Is it not supposed to cause an error? It is supposed to cause an error. But because of what we call function hoisting, all right, what JavaScript will do is that once JavaScript will take this function declaration to the top of this file. So definitely what JavaScript will do is that to take this, it will make it look like this. All right. But for us, the thing is like this. So, but whenever you do this, JavaScript will take all the function declarations not function expressions. So all function declarations, JavaScript will hoist them, will take them to the top of the file. That means they will be the first code to be executed. So if I run this code now, we are not going to get any error. Everything will work fine. Do you understand it? But this is called function hoisting. This function declaration will be taken to the top. That means once execution starts from top to bottom, all right, for you now, you think that the execution will start from say hello before the declaration. No, JavaScript will take all this function to the top, all right? To the top, and then JavaScript will now start executing from the function declaration down to the function call. This can be something that can cause errors, so be very, very careful with it. Avoid function hoisting. Kukuma, write it yourself. This should be the best way to do this. All right? This is the best way to do this. Before you use any variable or any function, please always make sure that you have declared them first. All right, you have declared them or initialized them. Make sure you have declared them before you use them. All right, so this is it. But with function hoisting, this is still okay. Nothing will happen. Everything will run well because JavaScript will do the work for you. JavaScript will take the function declaration up. All right, that is function hoisting. But for function expression, function hoisting doesn't work. So if I say, let's do this now. We are no longer using function declaration. We want to use, we are using function expression here. So if we run this code now, this will not be hoisted. It will not be taken to the top. So when you try to run, say hello, without even declaring it, there will be an error. So if I run this code now without debugging, it will throw an error for us. Okay, it says reference error, cannot access say hello before initialization. So here I'm trying to access say hello before initialization. So this will not work for function expression. Function expressions are not hoisted, but functions declarations are hoisted, okay? All right. So unlike function declarations, which are hoisted to the top of their scope, function expressions will throw an error if called before they are assigned. All right, this is what we have already seen. You have seen the error. So whether you're using function expression or function declaration, always make sure, please, always make sure that you declare whether variables or function, make sure you declare them before you use them, okay? All right, so I have already shown you an example. All right, here, this will not be hoisted. This will be an error, okay? All right, so we also have something we call first-class citizens. Functions are treated as first-class citizens. Functions are treated like any other data type you can talk about. Numbers, strings, object arrays, name them, null, undefined. Functions are treated like them. They are the same thing. That means I can assign a function to a variable, which is function expression that we have already seen. That means I can pass a function as a parameter. Do you understand? I can pass a function as a parameter to another function. I can return a function as a return type. Okay, so let us see all these examples. Okay, so in JavaScript, functions are first-class citizens, meaning they can be treated as values. So a function can be treated as a value. All right. Functions are treated like every other data type that you know. So you can use them as values. Okay. They are also evaluated like other ones. So function expressions can be assigned to variables. They can be passed as arguments to other functions, and they can also be returned from functions. So already we have seen how you can assign function expression to a variable, but we have not seen how to pass it as an argument or return it as a function. So, but let us see that now, okay? Let's do a few experiments here. Let's do some coding here. So first of all, already we have seen how to, this is assigning a function expression to a variable. Now, let us see, let me take this guy out. So let us see how you can actually pass it as an argument. So I could actually say something like, this is how you pass it as an argument. Whether I use function expression or not, I can say greet. All right. I can say greet. Oh, sorry. I have to use the function keyword before the greet. Okay. This is function declaration. Okay. So I can say greet. Then I am passing another function. I can say say hi. All right. So in this say hi, now for me to use this parameter inside of it, I can just say, I can just do say hi and I call it as a function. Do you understand? Now, what I can do now is this. Since I already have this function say hello, that is a function variable, I can pass it as an argument. So I can now say, if I call this greet is expecting a function. Do you understand? So I can pass it any function and I can pass it say hello. All right. And when I do this, watch out. If I run this code now, this greet is going to print out hello. And I will run it, then I will run it with debugging. You can see. Now, what is the magic that is happening here? Let us see. Let us debug. I'll put my uh, point here and let us run and debug. Now we are here. All right. So I will step into. If you want to go into the details of a function, you use step into. If you just want to step over and just go through, you step over. But I want to step into the function. I'll step into, and it takes me here. All right, this is where I am now. So since I have another function called, I will also do step into. You can see it took me to say hello. That means we called the greet and passed in say hello. All right, then this greet went inside of the greet. Then the code was to call say hi, which is the parameter we have here, and the say hello is actually the parameter. Then it went to say hello, and now it is. I will now say step over. That is where we get this thing printed out. So here we are passing a function as an argument. Our greet function was expecting a function as a parameter, because inside of it we are calling it as a function. Then we are now saying we are now passing the say hello, which is another function, as an argument, because our greet function was expecting a function. Okay. So this is it, okay? This is how you can pass a function as an argument, all right? You have to declare the function to be expecting, to expect a parameter of function type. Then when you now call it to pass in a real function, whether function expression or just, now even without this, I can still do something like this, okay? If I don't want to pass in this say hello, I can just say this is a function expression, an anonymous function expression, and I can just do this. It works the same way. Okay, don't bother if you don't really get this whole thing well. All right, as we go on, one thing with me is that while I keep teaching you, I'll be making references to what we have already talked about before. All right, so I run without debugging, and of course we will still have say hello world printed out. All right, because this our greet is expecting a function, and when you pass in this function, this will be called. This whole function, it is like we are doing function expression. Okay, so that is it. So how can you return a function? How can a function return a function? So let's do this. I have another function, okay, and I will call it um, whatever I call it. I don't just know what to do. I just call it. I can call it anything. But I'm going to return a function expression. I will return function. Okay. And what I'm returning is, I will say console.log hello. Okay, now look at what is happening here. Remember the return values that we talked about in the last session. Okay, so this function, when I call it, I'm expecting it to return something for me. So it has a return keyword that is returning something. So, but what if now I will now say const, I will now say, let me just say return value. I'm short of words. I'm short of name, so I'll say return, but then I'm calling sum. Remember that this sum, if I call it, it is returning. When I call this sum, it will return this function for me. And this anything that is returned, this is a function expression that is being returned. Once it is returned, I will assign it to return values. And what do I do with it? Later, I can now say return values. I will call it because it is a function that is being returned and it's a function that is being assigned. It's like you're using function expression. So when you call this sum, the sum is actually called and it is returning this. So it is almost the same thing as if I'm assigning this function to this value. So once this thing is returned, this will be this return value will be seen as a function. And if I run without debugging, all right, it will say hello. So let's run with debugging. Let me show you. I run with debugging. So we are here in the return value, calling the return value. So I will step into, all right. Now, when I step into, you can see that as I stepped into, it went into this function that is being returned because that is what was returned from this sum, and that's what was assigned to this return value. So when I call it, it went to the value. So this is what was returned. So when I do this, I step over, it is printing hello, and that is it. Okay. So that is how you can return functions, okay? Don't worry, when you practice this thing more, all right, when you start coding real, you're going to see more of this, okay? That is it. So thank you very much. Thank you very much. I will see you in the next section. Please, if you have any question, any confusion, drop it in the comment section. If you want us to or you can reach out to us, please. Just reach out to us, okay? We are always available for you. Thank you very much, and I'll see you in the next section.